myth. But first of all, I want to find out what our panellists made of Philip Roth's latest work, The Humbling. With me now, the scientist, philosopher and poet Raymond Tallis, the journalist Marina Hyde, author of the book Celebrity, and the columnist Johann Hari. Now, Johann, we heard Philip Roth telling Kirsty there that the kernel, the starting point for this book was the idea of an actor who'd lost his magic. Do you think that portrait is fulfilled in the course of the novella?
It really breaks my heart to answer this question, because I agree that Philip Roth is the greatest living American writer. Operation Shylock and American Pastoral are two of my favourite novels. This is so bad, I almost want to believe it was written by one of the imposters that crop up in Philip Roth's books every now and then, pretending to be Philip Roth.
The inverted commas Philip Roth.
Exactly.
Yes.
It starts out as a stress dream about an actor forgetting his lines on stage, he can't cope, but very quickly turns into a wet dream, basically, where it's this extended, bizarre, old man's pornographic fantasy about these lesbians who desperately want to have sex with this 65-year-old man in this bizarre way. And I don't even mind, you know, Roth has been sexually explicit before in ways that were fascinating. All the irony, all the self-deprecation, all the distance are gone from it. It's just this bizarre and so banal. You know, I thought Philip Roth would have slightly more interesting sexual fantasies than this. It's so boring.
Do you think it's as reductive as that,
I
Marina?
wasn't sure. Well, I don't think the lesbians did particularly want to have sex with the old man. I thought that came across really clearly. I felt he was far more rejected than he was. No, I thought it was rather sad. I mean, I think it was very interesting that he made the central character an actor as opposed to, say, a sculptor or a novelist, because there's something about acting that, you know, you have to redo it again every night. You have to revive this thing every night, and when the central character loses his ability to be able to act, this happens in this relationship as well, that he can't. There's no permanence to this thing. He has to keep kind of willing it back into being, this relationship, which I'm afraid is, you know, rather obviously doomed. No, I felt it far. I thought it worked better than that.
And if it is purely a sexual fantasy, it's slightly a strange one, isn't it? I mean, he's an older man with a bad back who's reduced to just one sexual position.
Yes, I guess that's probably not my greatest problem with the novel. I mean, I share my fellow panellists' views. It seems to me it starts off brilliantly. You know, he'd lost his magic, that short sentence, and then it's absolutely brilliant. Superb exposition of the impact on this actor of the decline of his ability to act. So for the first 30 or 40 pages, we have Chekhov. Then suddenly we have Playboy. And then towards the end, he recovers his Chekhovian penetration. The very odd thing about it is he not only fails in the plot, but he also fails at a very elementary level in technique. Whereas you have the brilliant Philip Roth voice at the beginning, expounding what's going on, suddenly that voice is parcelled amongst various other characters, and it's the same voice amongst those characters who tell the plot in a way that's terribly helpful to the author, in a very clumsy way. So, like Johann and like Marina, I feel it is a disastrous novel.
Well, I don't think you were saying it was disastrous.
I didn't think it was disastrous. I actually, for a large part of it, it felt a lot more to me like a play. Perhaps because they do have these speeches, and almost perhaps like an interior monologue in which lots of different characters play different bits of Philip Roth's brain. That's conceivable. But no, I didn't think it was as much of a failure as you guys are suggesting.
But there were moments when I could see that he was trying to be Chekhovian. Obviously, the ending is. And there's one character, he goes to a psychiatric hospital, he meets a woman who's filled with rage for her husband, who's trying to persuade someone to kill her husband, who does feel very Chekhovian. But then, as you say, it turns into a completely different book 40 pages in. You could lop out that middle section, which is the first 40 pages and the last 10 pages, and you'd have quite a nice Chekhovian short story. By Roth standards, it wouldn't be great, but by anyone else's standards, it would be pretty impressive. The rest is just, God, I'm amazed you thought... Did you honestly believe those lesbians existed, Marina?
No, I thought it was... I thought it was sort of ridiculous. I mean, they weren't... It certainly didn't seem to me a fantasy in any shape or form. I thought he was a self-loathing fantasy, if anything, because he was so pathetic in it, and he was so obviously going to be, you know, done up like a kipper by this lesbian passing through.
Yes,
describe her as that.
Yes, I mean, he may... Sorry.
I'm not even too sure that the lesbian's reluctant. I mean, the first lesbian seemed to be actually driving things to a degree that, you know, was clearly...
The first second lesbian.
Lesbian A.
The character Peggy.
Exit pursued by a bear. But it seems to me that one of the things that really concerned me was this failure really to differentiate the characters, to differentiate their voices. And you may say there may be different voices of Philip Roth, But that's not how it was presented in the plot.
And the lesbians beg him for sex. I mean, they, you know, which seems to be slightly unusual in it.
Well, yeah, but he is a desperate man, isn't he? And his desperacy is shown, and his vulnerability is shown. I mean, for example, he's so keen to keep her, he starts thinking, could I possibly have a child with this woman? I mean,
Sure,
that's
it's
not
really
Playboy,
pathetic.
is it?
Yes, it's really pathetic.
But it's a fantasy where Roth is Roth in his weak and debilitated state, but the women are fantasy objects. You've got this much younger lesbian who comes in, this red-haired woman
No,
who...
she's so damaged. I don't think she's a fantasy object in any way. She's not like some, you know, your classic idea of your lesbian fantasy, is she? She's a sort of damaged daughter of... It's all rather messed up, I think. I don't think it's particularly alluring.
It's to compare it with Everyman, which is a successful account of ageing.
This is one of his earlier the novellas he's been writing in his later life. Yes.
Which is really an extraordinarily elegiac representation of the progressive pruning of age, ending with the ultimate pruning of death. And I just thought that was fantastic. Beautifully measured, beautifully constructed, and not a hair out of place in terms of plot and plausibility and so on.
But as you alluded to earlier, Johann, and we do expect in some of Roth's books extreme sex, don't we? I mean, there's the liver in Portnoy's Complaint, the scene which I won't even go into at the beginning of Sabbath Theatre.
Well, sure. Well, this is... Masturbation has always been a theme in Roth's work, but this is the first time you feel like you're catching him masturbating, when you feel that all the wit and all the irony and all the distance and all the intelligence has gone out of it. And I don't think you have to have, you know, perfect women in order for them to be fantasy objects. Woody Allen's women are all terribly damaged, but they're all fantasy objects of his. I think in the same way, these are damaged women, certainly, but they're ludicrous as well.
It raised some interesting questions about the role of sex in literary fiction, because actually it is often seems to be very intrusive and damages all the other ambitions of literary fiction.
Indeed. Well, The Humbling by Philip Roth is published by Jonathan Cape. His hero's relationship with audience and fame, as we've been discussing, was a complex one.